Hey everyone, it's Anna. Welcome back to my channel. Thanks so much for visiting. I thought I would hop on and share the card that I made using the image that I watercolored with you in my last video. This is the one that I did using the vintage watercolor technique and the Speedball writer, Elegant writer, and the Distress ink, and finally the Derwent Inktense pencils. So I think it turned out really beautiful. So once I had the image painted, I cut it down a little bit and matted it on some black cardstock. And then I added the whole thing to a red piece of cardstock that I layered with black, and added this sentiment strip from the set. It's from the Holly Branch set. And then I gave it a splatter with some really beautiful shimmery silver watercolor paint, which hopefully you can see, but it's super sparkly. So I think that card turned out really nice. And then I made this one too, using a similar technique, except for instead of doing the Elegant Writer ink around the outside of the image, this one I just used watercolor. So I think they both turned out really nice. And now I have 2 more cards for my holiday card stash. So that's great. And then I thought tonight I would come on and share another way to color the image, which is, very similar to watercolor because part of it is watercoloring. But I thought I would incorporate some of the pearl powders. This is a little powder I picked up from Ranger. And then I will incorporate some of this Pearl X pigment as well. And they don't, I don't think they have their own binder in them. So I'm going to use a little bit of watercolor with them, and have that watercolor binder then will keep those on the paper as well, instead of letting them rub right off. So I'm going to stamp my holly image on a piece of watercolor paper. Oops, and I think I just changed the color tone of my light. Oh shoot. I can't tell which one it was. I think it's that one. All right, sorry about that. So this is a piece of watercolor paper. It's 100% cotton, and it's from Gen Craft. And I'm going to stamp on the rough side, but it also has a smooth side. I like stamping on the textured side of watercolor paper. So I'm going to put that there, and this time I am going to stamp in my permanent VersaFine Clair ink, and give this a couple stamps and get my holly onto my watercolor paper. So it's Sunday night, but I think I'll hold this video and not upload it until tomorrow, so Monday. I'm very tired. I had a friend come over today and she helped me dig the last of my dahlias. Actually, I did the digging, and while I laid them out, dug them up and laid them out for her, I laid the labels on them, and she tied a label to the stem so that they won't get mismarked during the dividing and storage process. So that was very, very nice. It was nice to have help in her company, and we had a good visit while we were there doing that. So it was very, very nice. It looks like I missed a little piece up there, so I'm just going to give this one more impression to kind of capture that top of that holly. All right, there we go. And I'm going to leave the holly in the Mini Misty in case I want to stamp it after I do my painting. All right, so that looks perfectly stamped. I have a piece of paper towel here that I'm just going to dab my brush on, and I do have some water here. It has just some green in it from the last holly I painted, so I'm just going to use it as is and not worry about changing it out. The watercolors I'm going to be using are some Paul Rubens watercolors that I bought in tubes and squeezed into some pans. And here is the lid to that palette. So even though it doesn't have a white surface, it works just fine for the palette. So I'm going to get this watercolor paint here ready to use by adding some water to it. And this color is where I'm going to add some of that blue pigment powder. Where did it go? Here it is. If I can get it open. So it's really, really pretty. And I'm not too concerned about contaminating it. So I'm just going to dip my paintbrush in there and add some of that to my paint palette. And basically what I'm doing is creating a shimmery watercolor paint. But by doing this, the binder in the watercolor paint will keep the pigment powder adhered to the paper instead of it just basically flaking off. So get a little bit more pigment here. And I want to get it kind of loose, thin it down quite a bit. I'm trying to make sure I have enough for my entire background. So there you can see how thin it is and how pretty those pigment pearls are. So now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to lightly paint my entire background. I'm not too worried about going around my holly because I'm using a color that I can really paint over and it will look really nice with the blues and greens that I'm going to paint the holly anyways. So we've got that. Now if I want to, I can thin that down a little bit more, but I kind of like that rough texture there on the outside of that roughly painted rectangle. So I'm going to kind of let this dry and I'll be right back. All right, so this has mostly dried. I don't know if you can see the pearl shimmer in there, but it is really, really pretty. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start choosing some greens from my palette and painting in my holly. I'm going to use a smaller paintbrush. This is a number 2 Princeton. And I'm just going to choose some various different greens from the palette here and add them to my lid and paint with those as I go. So I'll go ahead and zoom in so you can see a little bit better. There we go. And I know you probably can't see the palette, but what you're seeing I think is more fun. So I'll try and keep this over here for you. So I'm just going to add various different colors of green to this. And as I go, the color will change a little bit, and each leaf will basically have its own type of color green, but that's kind of the fun of it, is the variety in it. So I'm going to start up here, and I'm just going to paint right over that blue from the background that went over my holly leaves. I was all over. Very tired as well. So that looks pretty. And then I think each time I paint a new leaf, I'm going to choose a color of green from my palette. I've got a whole row of greens and blues here, a couple rows there actually. And that way I can change up the color here that I'm using. So I'll probably just select one at random, and that way each one of my leaves has a unique color. Ooh, that one really changed it. That one I think is the indigo. I'll do this leaf here. I'm breaking my rule of skipping to an area that, you know, skipping over an area that has been painted. So I'm having to be super, super careful. Because I don't really want my green from this leaf to bleed into the lower leaf, and I don't want the green from the lower leaf to bleed into the upper leaf. It's kind of nice having this little base coat of blue underneath here. Just adds another little dimension to my painting. A lot of painters will do a base coat of yellow, especially if they're painting like an outdoor portrait or something. And then that base coat of yellow gives that overall yellow sun cast to everything. That's kind of nice. Couple more leaves. Let's see. Let's change up the green a little bit. And then let's change it up even more. Let's add a little bit of this yellow green to it. All right, now I need to come back up here and paint the little turned leaves. And I think since they are kind of a dark green, I'll stick with this little yellow green I've got going here. There we go. Now I can decide if I want to add any more paint to some of these areas. So I think I'll darken up this one just a smidge. Maybe here. Everything looks so evenly painted. Same color. I kind of like it to have a little more variety. So I'll just drop in a little bit more pigment, and then that should change it up just enough. Okay, I like that a lot. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the berries. I'm going to paint them red, but I'm going to also add some of that pearl powder once I've got my red down in the pink color. I'm going to start with red. Okay, now I'm going to add a little bit of this pearl powder to my palette. And again, I'm not worried about contaminating my powder. But if you are, you wouldn't want to stick your paintbrush right down in there. I'm going to just use this, the lid. So once this dries, then I can just pop the lid right back on the powder. And I'm just going to drop a little bit of this in here while this paint is still damp. And then it's going to kind of flow into that other paint that I've added there. And give these berries kind of a fun color shift to them in the light. There we go. Let's see if I can get you to see that. I don't know. Maybe there you'll be able to catch a little bit of it. It shifts from red to blue, so maybe once it's a little more dry, you'll be able to see it. But there we go. That is the image painted. I'm actually going to get a little bit of my blue on my paintbrush, and I'm going to splatter it as well. Ooh, my water is really, really pretty right now. Put the pearl powders in there. So I'm just going to get a little more blue watercolor on my palette. And there is a little bit of that shimmer powder in this as well. And I am going to use this to splatter my project. So I'm just going to tap my paintbrush on my scissors. Oh, I forgot to paint the holly stalk. So I better do that. I need to paint the stem of the holly. I'm just going to wet this brown watercolor paint here. Pull in a little bit of that green. There we go. And then we have one painted holly stem. Great. There you go. You might be able to see the blue shift on that holly now. But I don't know. If not, it looks really, really pretty. So there we go. We have another version of my painted holly, and I have two more of these as well. This one is one that I painted with the shimmers too, and maybe you can see the blue shift in these holly berries. This one I also splattered with pink as well as the blue, so you can see a little bit of that pink in the background there. And this one I chose a lighter color, almost a teal watercolor when I did the background. And then this one, I chose a darker blue one and a little bit more blue in the holly leaves as well. But followed the same process by painting the background first and then painting the holly leaves right over the top. So I think they turn out really beautiful, and they are going to make beautiful cards. So in my next video, I'll show you the finished cards. So thanks so much for spending some time with me tonight. I will talk to you again very soon. Bye.